really glad to be hosting this particular panel discussions. And without further ado, can I ask the panelists to maybe introduce themselves? Maybe I can start with Mick.
Hi everyone. As you can see here from the background, I'm from Alibaba Group. I'm in the headquarters in Hangzhou. I'm from the UK, and at the moment I'm director for brand cooperation within Alibaba's platform governance department. Our job is to cooperate with brand owners, vendors, governments to understand any intellectual property issues that people are facing, and then come up with solutions prioritized around what those biggest problems are, and then roll them out and make them as accessible as possible for rights holders. So I've been really interested in listening to the previous sessions, which is also useful information for a function like mine within Alibaba Group and amongst my fellow panelists. So we already work together on some IP issues. So I'm really pleased to be here amongst peers. Thank you.
Great. Aaron?
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good evening, whatever applies to all of you. So this is Arindam Hazarika here. I am the Counsel Trademark and Brand Protection for Western Digital. And I'm pleased to be here joining so much learned panelists here to discuss about the win-win topic today. But more than that, I think before we dwell deeper into that, I was really fascinated by the session of Viji where she talked about the brand purpose, which we can focus a bit also during our session about the win-win. And look forward to this session today. Thank you so much.
Thank you. James?
So hi, everyone. My name is James Yip. I'm from PBH, the parents company of Kevin Klein and Tommy Hilfiger. I currently manage brand protection for APAC. So it's really good to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, James. So in this session, we are going to talk about making the platform relationship win-win. Interesting question, right? So we are going to divide the session into three different, subsections. First of all, we want to look into, the definition of platforms, because that's one of the important part to address the questions. And then we're going to talk about what win-win means. And then lastly, actually, how do we achieve this win-win? So I want to get this session to be as interactive as possible. So feel free to jam in. We have prepared some questions to kind of address this particular issue in different angle, but I think the best kind of scenario is that we are interactive and we actually don't have to answer the prepared questions as well. So let's see if we can do that. So let me first get started with the discussion. So let's go back to the basic first. So there are many platforms from the traditional giants like Alibaba. I think Alibaba is definitely one of the first one that pioneer the kind of the platform brand cooperation model. But there are also others like hybrid social media like Facebook, WeChat, which are not really e-commerce platforms. How do you define platform? Maybe I'll ask this question to Arindam and Jane first.
Okay, I'll go first. So I think platform is something which can be, for my definition, what I consider a platform is kind of a digital service, which basically enables interaction between two set of users. And that's why it's a very broad definition. It necessarily does not include only e-commerce platforms. It can be a social media platform. It can be a payment gateway. It can be anything which basically, it's kind of a digital service which facilitates two set of users. That's what a very, very basic definition of a platform which comes to my mind. And that's a very broader one. And which coincides very, very similarly to a concept of intermediary. Those two terms are very, very close by. And if you ask me from my perspective, from a definition of platform, I would say any platform or any kind of digital service enabler wherein my products, the products of my company are being sold. So that's what I would define it as. Thank you.
So my version of an online platform would be any cyberspace which enable people to host a specific function. So it's quite general also. It could be to trade, to social, or to learn. So in regard to brand protection, a majority of our efforts actually goes towards online marketplace in specific website or app-based. We also very much focus on what you call hybrid social media platforms such as Facebook, or what I phrase it as hybrid communication to platforms such as WeChat.
Yeah, interesting. Because certainly, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think traditionally speaking, when we talk about platforms, it's really the e-commerce platform that we're talking about, and they are the one that actually release some kind of cooperation program. We don't see any program from Facebook, Twitters, or anything like that. They are more passive in this sense. So let me ask you this: how much of your daily work revolve around resolving issues with the platform that you defined? And do you see this concentrated on a few platforms, or do you see this also spreading out to more platforms at the moment?
So should I go first?
Yeah.
So I would say around 50% of my work actually revolve around a platform of some kinds. So traditionally, we were able to separate out like online and offline enforcement. But these days, most counterfeiters actually conducted their illicit trade in parallel. So for example, offline counterfeiters in China will more often hold a WeChat account to displace their good for order. So there's no secret in China, a vast majority of the consumer spending has migrated from offline to online. For us to stay relevant, we shifted our proportion of our enforcement work in favor to online. So there's certainly a few dominating platforms which account for a vast majority of the counterfeits. So in China, however, we are seeing an increasing trend in selling versus social media platform, and also some counterfeits advertisement being displaced through social media and communication hybrid platform.
So James, is there this trend, are you observing only in China, or how about other areas? Do you see the same trend as well?
I think in APAC is also other area, because I'm seeing live stream selling being offered by Facebook, and the seller will shift to Malaysia and Taiwan and Vietnam and Singapore. So it's widespread.
Interesting. And Aaron, what do you say about this?
I think I would agree with James. I think the world is evolving now. Most of the things are moving online. So I would say around 60 to 70% is concentrated on these kind of efforts with the platforms. And when I say platforms, I think predominantly I would say the bigger platform, the older platforms like an Amazon, or maybe something for India like a Flipkart, which is a big platform, B2C platform. We're also seeing a lot of evolving new platforms with whom we're having interactions, something like a B2B platforms, something like Udan, which is a new B2B platform for India. And also we have seen instances wherein we, not from a cooperation angle, but from a tackling angle, platforms like Facebook Marketplace, that's something we have seen recently coming up a lot in terms of what the things we are seeing. And one interesting note, which also I saw apart from these traditional platforms, is OLX. I think that's strictly a classified platform, but we are seeing a lot of issues spring up there as well. I mean, that's also something which is very, very interesting to note. But I would say on a nutshell, I would say around 60 to 70% time it goes off tackling these kind of platforms. That's how important it is at this point of time. Thank you.
Interesting. So, Aaron, I actually have a follow-up question for you as well. So, you certainly, I think it's fair to say that when we talk about platform cooperation, the Chinese platforms are the one who are kind of taking a step ahead of the game at the moment. So in outside China, especially from where you manage in India as well, do you see a big difference there? What's the landscape in terms of platform cooperation?
So I think it is really now, I think the situation is much better. And I would say the platforms are more and more inclined to go towards the compliance way, to have these kind of interactions. And I think one of the things which I'm seeing recently, the trend is trying to have this cadence call with the brand owners. Try and have it every month or maybe 15 days or whatever that is, which is basically important because that sets a continuous flow of interaction between the platforms. If you ask me from the platform perspective, I would say evolved platforms or older platforms like Amazon have really established kind of system and structures in place in which we have a very good cooperation program, whether with Amazon directly or maybe through some other associations like IACC or others. For other platforms like Flipkart and all, individually, the brand protection teams and our teams are getting in touch with them, having these cooperation programs, wherein what we do, we try and have a cadence call with them, discuss all the concerns which we have. We are not only doing a reactive mechanism system, we are also trying to have some proactive measures as well with them, which they are very much interested in. Now, for the newer platforms, which is just evolving, just starting with, we see there's a lot of scope for improvement there in terms of how we can interact better and what all things they can do. But I think from a reactive perspective, we are still in that stage, on a reactive stage. We have not gone to the proactive stage. But then I believe that in days to come, we should have much evolved system to deal with it. One of the ways which I feel might be helpful for some of the platforms and the brand owners to have that interaction is getting into MOA stage, MOU stage. That's something which I see as a very good model, which a lot of times has been adopted. I'm sure Mike will have a lot of updates to say on that. But I think how it helps is it basically creates a common platform and a common pedestal for both the brand owners and the platforms to be on the same page, in terms of what all things can be done. And it basically lays down all the things, the expectations of both the parties, and then a common solution which can be a win-win for both set of stakeholders. That's how I would like to sum it up.
Interesting. So actually, I want to ask Mike questions about this. So I remember probably a couple of years ago, maybe about five years ago or something like that. I think brand owners and platforms like Alibaba are more in conflict with each other. So when you hear that the definition of platform actually expand beyond you guys, do you see this? Are you happy about this? Do you see this being a common understanding amongst other brand owners as well?
Yeah, I think what's been very useful for us at Alibaba Group over the last 5 years is that we've hired a lot of people that understand rights holders and are able to have conversations and really see eye to eye. So from my perspective, having previously been a consultant with the UK for the UK Intellectual Property Office and the UK Association doing IP, I think that helps. And the people in my team that we've hired we're all doing brand protection before. So I think that's allowed us to have another platform for communication and be able to build up a better understanding of what it is that rights holders need, and how that then matches with the realities of a tech company, right? So, there's a lot of technical experts in an internet company like Alibaba that are very good at writing source code and doing stuff like that. But then you have to match that with the expertise of rights holders and appreciate that, they know a lot that we would not know. And so we have to have those communication channels in place. I think what Aaron was saying about some platforms having that already and that kind of being a good start, I think absolutely right. That is a start, and then you use that kind of communication platform as a way to build up some of the notice and takedown optimization, which is obviously key. Proactive measures, as you mentioned, offline working with police for those really big offenders. And then even more advanced measures. And I think it's a process, but right at the very beginning is creating that platform for communication.
Cool. So I actually want to bring the discussion back a little bit on the platform's definition as well. I think Aaron mentioned the keywords I use as well, intermediaries. So they are when we do anti-counterfeiting monitoring and stuff like that, certainly the platforms would be only one part of it, but they're also like individual website, phishing emails, stuff like that exists to be distributing the counterfeiting goods. Mm-hmm. So when when we use the terms like intermediary in this case that James and Aaron use, this may include like registrars and web hosts and stuff like that. Do you see benefits of establishing some kind of cooperation with them as well?
Yes, and Alibaba does a lot of things. People think about Alibaba and think about Taobao, but actually we've got a lot of different technologies. For example, we have a trademark clearance tool, which is actually used by some of the trademark registering agencies to be able to work out what trademarks are already registered and which are not, so they can help rights holders to be able to build their brand portfolios, for example. So there's a lot of opportunities with those intermediaries. In terms of just the online enforcement space, intermediaries or vendors play a very, very valuable role in the industry. James was talking about how he's responsible for all of APAC, right? And his team is responsible for all of APAC. But vendors can be specialized and really understand how this platform's working or exactly how that country is working, and be able to provide that value and that amount of specialization and expertise that we wouldn't all be able to, get one by one, just focused in our own minds. So yeah, they're a really important part of the ecosystem to have intermediaries.
Cool. How about James and Aaron? What's your opinion on that?
So from a brand enforcement perspective, the registrar and the rep host, I feel that they hold all the card. And the only entity that I feel that can make them to do anything is the ICANN. And as far as I know, they have never kind of intervened on behalf of the trademark holder.
They really disagree with you. They would say they can't do anything.
Well, yeah. When I say, intermediary, I do not include them. They are usually like ginormous, like GoDaddies, and we have worked with them through personal relationship. But I feel that they have no legal obligation to help the brand owner, and they take the positions that they have for policy to follow. And if they were told that they have an infringer on their platform, they usually just notify them that you have, notice, and, give them the notice and just leave it for the brand to deal with the infringer, directly. So, in short, it would be great if they were proactive, but I wouldn't see this happening.
Yeah. But let's just say that not in terms of the overall, counterfeiting issues, but in terms of the proportion of headache that they're giving you. How much percent of the headache are coming from the platforms, the e-commerce platform, and how much are becoming, how much of the headache are actually driven from this, registry, registrar, and other types of, intermediaries?
I would say around 10% is from this intermediary. We just have vendor, as Mick mentioned, to help us to scrape for any kind of infringing domains, and we take them down normally without problem. In general, we just have customer. We have a customer kind of a contact email where the consumer can come to us and say, I saw this domain and it looks like, the official ones with the right domains. Please help us to verify. So this also create a heaps of other problem, by confusing the consumer. So I would say around 10%.
Cool. All right. So Aaron?
I think it's even less. I would say it's around 5% or something like that. Not much there. I mean, it's predominantly around the marketplaces, and that's whom we deal with, and that's whom we discuss all our issues which we have currently at this point of time. And I think it's a very broad term to talk about being an intermediary. As per the Indian law, you ask me, I mean, just to give a small context on this, as per the IT Act of India, I think intermediary is something which comprises of all your social media, all your ISP providers, all your e-commerce marketplace. Everything covers within that bracket of intermediary. So I think that from that perspective, if you ask me from what we are discussing at this point of time, just 5%. But otherwise, yeah, I would say 100% is going concentrated on the intermediary stuff. That's how it is.
Mm-hmm. But by that 95% platforms, are you talking about the e-commerce platforms, or do you also include the social media platform like the WeChat and TikTok and stuff like that?
So I think if you ask me predominantly from a business perspective, I would say around roughly around 90% would be concentrated on these bigger marketplaces. And the rest 10%, I would say, would comprise of Facebook Marketplace or something like a OLX or maybe something like a Instagram, where we see on and off issues, which is not very regular, which is something which springs up sometime, whenever it's highlighted, or we do get highlighted that by our own business partners. Otherwise, 90% of the time, it's all concentrated on the marketplace and the issues we are facing. Because it's not only about counterfeits, sometimes it's also about a lot of, I think Mike will also agree on that one. It's also about a lot of times about marketplace violations per se. It's not only counterfeits. So a lot of things are covered within that. So that's a broader umbrella.
So what do you mean by marketplace violations?
So any kind of violation which is not as per the policy or the process which is in place of a marketplace. So something like a seller is selling something which is, but I think there are some terms and conditions by which he has to sell in that marketplace. Mike can throw some light on that. And we sometimes observe that our product has been sold, which is a violation of those policies laid down by the platform itself. And that is not essentially counterfeit sometimes, but then that's something which we also see as a potential problem for us when we are trying to facilitate the product to the end consumer. And that's when the platform has to help us in terms of defining it and laying down that this is a marketplace violation and this is the action we're going to take on that. That's something which we have also seen in some of the instances.
Great, thank you. So let's move on to the second session about win-win then. When we talk about win-win, it's important that we also make the other party win as well. So let me ask you to reverse your role. Aaron and James, can you pretend that you're the platform now? What do you want to win in the relationship with the brand owners? Let me ask James first.
For any business to sustain a stable growth, so we must gain the trust as a platform from the consumer, especially the trust in purchasing authentic products on my platform. So I will tackle them. I will want to win all the support from all different right holders so that they can help me to tackle and make a kind of fit-free environment. So in a proactive perspective, I will ask for all this product intelligence, such as pricing and any product special features. I will also seek for product verification support, and also seek for any comments that they have towards IPR protection within my platforms to help improve the environment.
So what you want to win is basically reputation. Is that correct?
It's just that we are in alliance. That's what we want to win. Is that we're not being combative, and we should be collaborating together to help us, to help the platform to improve. That we share the common goals. No platform would like the consumer to say that 20% of the stuff you purchase from us could be counterfeits.
Yeah, certainly that could be very damaging. So, Aaron, what's your opinion?
I think I'd agree on that, but James, I think that's the biggest one, which should be for any platform. I think reputation is the first thing. And also the thing is to have that confidence that the platform, my platform, if it is my platform, which I'm selling products for, the end consumer should get an authentic product each and every time. And I would also appreciate if some of the brands can also laud the efforts in terms of what has been happening, because that puts an extra amount of confidence for the customer as well. When a brand says that, okay, our products have been sold in this platform and the quality of product which have been sold is really good or really great, or after all the efforts which James had mentioned about the proactive mechanism and all which I put in, and then those kind of efforts, that gives me, my end consumer, the confidence to buy that product each and every time to see that. And I think one of the key areas which I would also like to see is the kind of ratings and the kind of reviews which are there for a particular product. That basically reflects exactly what the product you're going to buy. So as an end consumer, if suppose you go and select a product in a platform, first thing you'll start looking at, that's human tendency, for me at least. First thing I start looking at is what is the review of this? Or let me check the rating, if the rating is good, oh, this looks good. Then I'll go to the price. I'll say, okay, this looks fine, but maybe a bit more. Maybe I can pay this much. It's okay. The rating looks good. And then I'll go to the review and see what the reviews are. So those reviews basically determine my decision to buy that product. So from a platform perspective, reputation, and I think this kind of internal housekeeping, cleaning up, all these reviews, ensuring all the reviews are correct and authentic so that the customer is getting authentic assessment of what exactly they're buying is really critical. Now, coming to the proactive piece of it, I would say a lot of things are there which Mike can, of course, throw some light on. I mean, we can give a very limited idea on that one. But I think to start with, brand authorization model for some of the brands, if required, like only on the basis of brand authorization, if you can sell those products, that is something I would consider as a good thing. Proactive checks on basis on some technology like OCR, wherein you can catch up the image. If some image is not matching up the brand, something is wrong with the image. Proactive checks on the text in terms of brand abuse, which can be avoided, just to check the text and everything of the brand which is coming up is correct. So those are very, very basic checks, I would say. And in some cases, I've also seen that the brand owners are also cooperating with the platforms to give them some advice on how to identify products, the counterfeit and original product. And basic identifiers definitely goes a long way, to convince that particular customer when they're buying it to just check and see what all things are there. So I think there are a lot of things which can be done, but I would say predominantly these are some of the things. Reputation and also the basic platform hygiene is something which is critical if you want to have that assurance from the customer.
So Aaron, am I correct that from your perspective, if you are a platform, you think that what you want to win is also in line with James? So it's more a reputational gain there. Cool. All right, Mike, your turn. So pretend you are the brand owner now. What do you want to win in the relationship?
Well, firstly, Aaron and James spoke a lot about consumer confidence and making sure the consumer is getting what they want. We completely agree with that. If consumers are paying for A and getting B, they don't have confidence in the platform, and they just wouldn't exist, and they would be shopping offline, or they would be shopping on e-commerce platforms that don't do that. So, indeed, a lot of our efforts are aimed around helping rights holders, but also making sure that consumers get what they want. So we track data in that. In 2020, there was about 1 in 10,000 transactions where the consumer sent a complaint because they thought that they got an IP infringing good. So a very low number, and we track that every year. In 2020, that was 33% less than it was in 2019, and 2019 was a lot less of those bad consumer reports than they were previously. So I completely agree with consumers. If I were a brand, what would I want? So I used to represent brands in IP. So I'll frame my answer like this. I think the basis will be to have a cost-effective and easy-to-use notification system. Because if you've got a cost-ineffective system, you can't use it very often. You can't report enough listings, or the listings are not processed quickly enough for it to make a difference. So we spend a lot of time making sure that as many brands as possible can use our IPP platform. We have about 40% increase in the total number of brand accounts on the platform last year. For us, that's very important because the e-commerce business was growing partly because of COVID, right? You've got a lot more business going on. You've got a lot more brands coming up, selling on e-commerce. We want to make sure that those brands know how they can send us notifications. Then at the same time, we need to make sure that when we've got all these additional brands using notifications, that we're able to process them as quickly as possible. If you don't do it quickly, if you sit on it for a week, then what impact does that have on the person that's trying to sell the IP infringement, right? So we need to keep that as low as possible. At the moment, in 98% of instances, we're able to process it within 24 hours, which is an improvement on last year, where it was 2019. Where it was 96%, and going back a few years, it was kind of 5 days. So I think we are where we want to be in terms of speed of processing, and that's something that rights holders really like. Both Aaron and James then talked about proactive measures, because we don't want notice and takedown to just, from a brand perspective, to be a game of cat and mouse. We're just constantly sending. The platform needs to use that data and learn from it, and then work out how to make algorithms to be able to find those same type of instances and then take them down by themselves. Now, we can do that partly with data that comes through the notifications, but we can do that partly through working with brands such as Western Digital and Calvin Klein and Tommy Hilfiger, that are able to provide us with additional brand knowledge so that we can perfect our algorithms. But we need to protect that brand knowledge as well, because some of it it's not the sort of, it might not be the sort of brand knowledge that you'd want it to go to the seller as well. So we have to have a trust and understanding around what we're going to do with that brand knowledge. So that can kind of reduce some of the burden of notifications even further. And then another thing that brands often want is to be able to catch the really bad guys. So the guys that, we've punished them online, but they're still there. They're persistent. They're going across multiple platforms. They're big, sophisticated syndicates. What can platforms do to be able to provide brands with data to be able to catch those big fish? So we have quite a big cooperation model about our offline counterfeiting. We've really invested in hiring a lot of police, ex-Chinese police, to be our offline investigators, and we work together with law enforcement and brands to make sure that we can help facilitate raids offline. So that's important. And then I think once you've got this kind of platform built up around this notification, proactive monitoring, and offline, sometimes brands then look at Alibaba and say, "You're a big tech company. What else can you do?" I just spoke about the trademark clearance tool, for example. We've got another thing that we're using recently to try and help sellers to be able to generate their own images, so that they don't go and steal images from other places or download images from someone's Tmall store, someone's official website. So we create them with a way to make their own technology to make their own images more easily without perhaps having to spend a lot of money on photography. So that can then reduce further that type of infringements. We also then have a mapping service. So brands often say there are offline stores around China where we see them selling counterfeits. Is there a way that consumers could use the mapping service to report to us when they see that, so that we know where we can send our investigation agencies? So it's not then about our e-commerce platform, but it's about a brand exploitation for a technology company to be able to help in the wider society. So I think Alibaba have been in this kind of IP protection game for a long time, and what I just described is a bit of a process. And then eventually, I think you get into a space where you're facilitating and enabling IP protection in many parts of the industry.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. So now back to your own role. Do you think there's anything that when the other side talk about your role, there's anything missing from that? Well, just say no.
No, for sure. So I think just talking about some of the challenges that we have is that, there's hundreds of thousands of brands, right? And because we have such a huge system, we have to be able to work out, we've got such a huge platform. We've got so many different business models, and each brand wants something a little bit different, right? So sometimes if we have a situation where we look at our data and we say, okay, the biggest priority for us will be on this particular platform, in this particular infringement type, and we want to prioritize that and put relatively more resource into dealing with that. But from a rights holder perspective, they're focused on their own brand, and it may be that they've got a situation which is really, really number one priority, which is quite niche and isn't necessarily something that the vast majority of the other brands are experiencing. So I think that's sometimes where we can perhaps do a better job in terms of being tailored. But with resource limitations are what they are. We have to try and prioritize around the biggest issues. So yeah, as a brand, that would be an expectation and something we need to continue to do better and better.
Cool. So James and Aaron, back to your role as a brand protection manager. Do you feel you're winning at the moment in the platform relationship? Because you still mentioned that there are like 90% of your problems coming from the e-commerce platform specifically. So do you consider this winning at the moment?
Yes, I think we are winning, and we are heading to the right directions. There's indeed noticeable decrease in counterfeiting on the platforms that we collaborated with, such as Taobao, Tmall, JD, Pinduoduo, and WeChat. Recently, we also flagged a lot of issue to Alibaba regarding AliExpress, and we also saw a big jumps in proactive takedown. So, but there's still many works to be done.
Aaron?
Yes, absolutely. I would say we are winning. I mean, both platform and us are winning. 90% doesn't mean that there is a problem there. I think it just highlights the fact that how much things are moved online now. I think that's what the highlight is, and how many issues we have. That is on a daily basis. But in terms of the reactive mechanism, in terms of taking down those sellers, taking down action on those particular links or URLs is absolutely happening. And the platforms have been very, very helpful in that. But sometimes we do face some odd challenge here and there, wherein it takes some time to solve that particular problem. The TAT piece is something which is critical for us as a brand, because what happens is, for us as a brand owner, if I talk about it, any escalation of any kind of product, if counterfeit has been sold, the longer it stays in the platform, the bigger problem it is for the brand, because each and every day we are losing a lot of revenue around it. So that's something which is of I would say hard burn sometimes. But that does not mean that this situation is not where we both are winning. Platforms have been come forward and done a lot of good things for us as well. We have seen some good examples of some platforms doing some gating for some of the specifically for our products, wherein they have said that if this product belongs to this particular brand, we'll do these basic 3, 4, 5 things, which would be considered as gating for that brand. So those kind of things we have seen, but there's a long way to go, especially with respect to these platforms, as well as the upcoming newer platforms, which are very new to the ecosystem. Not as evolved as Alibaba or an Amazon is. But then I would say it's a bright start. It's a good start. And I don't see why we both cannot, win together. So, yes, absolutely.
Cool. So in different platforms cooperation program, they certainly have different features as well. Can you name one features of any program that you participate in that you feel are simply outstanding? You really love that particular way how they conduct the program. James and Aaron?
So I would say the Secret Buy program, which is offered by actually many different platforms. The program involves proactive screening themselves and utilizing of the backend database and using own intelligent analysis, such as sellers that could have been red flagged by other right holders. It helped to ease some of the burden that we have in terms of monitoring and test purchasing effort. So and I think the good thing is it does provide the intelligence to breach between online and offline enforcement. So on the surface, it might sound like a simple concept, but in reality, that it does show the platform are taking things proactively. In terms of other, programs, I think there's many which is also helpful, and they all serve a purpose, and I think they really helps.
Aaron, what's your view?
So I would say two things. So first is the kind of platforms whom I have been working with. One of them is Amazon. Of course, we've been working a lot with Amazon, especially in jurisdictions I'm responsible for. And I've seen Brand Registry as one of the top-notch platforms, or a service which is provided within the platform to ease out issues, because it's pretty well organized. It's very, very detailed in terms of how we can list things, how we can report things. And I think Project Zero, which is there in Amazon, these two, I would say, are really good examples of how we have been able to tackle issues. And additionally, I would say, irrespective of the platform, keeping cadence call with these platforms in a month or maybe in 15 days is something is proving to be a really, really great thing for us, especially for our brands. We have seen it with other platforms where they don't have a warm system like a BR or maybe a Project Zero. We have seen that keeping this cadence call with business and along with the brand protection teams of the platforms, it's a really effective tool to know exactly where you stand and how to resolve those issues which you are facing. So I would say that's a really helpful tool.
So Aaron, I think in one of the earlier answer you gave, you mentioned brand registration program. Can you expand a little bit on what you mean by brand registration program?
So basically, it's Brand Registry is just a program for Amazon.
Brand Registry.
Yeah. So if everyone is aware of it, I'll not go into detail, but essentially how it helps us is it gives you a right to register your brands in the platform. I'm sure Mike would be having a very similar program like that for Alibaba. And what it does is you just need to go to the portal, the registry portal, whatever you have, and go there and directly log into the account, and then you can start reporting those listings. What the good part is, a lot of times there are also automated controls which are there by which a lot of listings are taken down on its own. This is what the policy of that particular platform is. Now, on certain factors, they have really good automated systems as well to take down those listings. But the good thing is, for most of the things, you are in complete control of the whole thing. What you want to do, how you want to report it, what is the problem you are facing with these listings. And we've also seen that when you use utilizing a platform like Project Zero, which is a extension of the same program within the brand registry, is that you just need to go there and report all the listings and all the storefront listings as well of that particular seller at one go. And if there is one escalation for a seller, on the basis of that escalation, you'd get the seller removed from all the respective URLs or listings or whatever you call it in that particular platform. So that's something also we have seen. But as a company policy, I can tell you that for most of the cases wherein we want to establish a case of counterfeits, we go by the choice of buying samples. That's something we essentially believe is most important to determine whether a particular product is counterfeit or not. I mean, we have seen cooperation from other platforms wherein they have, given us a helping hand without even buying samples in some instances. But for 99.9% instances, we have been buying samples, getting them checked, and then accordingly reporting it through the mode, which is the brand registry, or any other mode which we're using it for other platforms. That's how it put it up as.
Great. So Mick, what's your goal in 2021 that you want to achieve with the brand owners? Is it recruiting more brands, or any particular thing that you guys want to focus on?
Yeah, so I think as technologies advance, e-commerce, including international cross-border e-commerce, becomes more and more accessible to more and more companies. and there's quite a vibrant industry to help small and medium-sized enterprises to be able to get onto our platforms and sell. So now I think the IP is always slightly behind the curve with in terms of commerce, and people they rush into the business and they think about IP a little bit later. So I think there's a little bit more that we can be doing in this year to make sure that when SMEs are themselves selling on our platforms, or they're impacted in an IP sense on our platforms, that they are right from an early stage, making sure their rights are registered, making sure that they know how enforcement works. And I think in some instances, there's more that we can do to make the enforcement process easier for SMEs. So we need to constantly be looking at who are the smaller companies, what is their experience when they're doing enforcement, perhaps without the budgets to be able to use an agency to have to be able to really, really specialize in each and every platform if they're doing it themselves. How can you get more and more accessible? So I think that's going to be a really big focus. James mentioned AliExpress, and I think that's a big, that's a rapidly increasing part of our business. That's predominantly a China to world model. So rights from all over the world can be enforced on that platform, which is good. But and it means that you can enforce a French trademark against a Chinese seller, for example, but which makes it easier. But people are not necessarily set up for doing complaints on AliExpress yet. We need to make sure they know how it's working. And then James spoke about proactive monitoring. So we're investing much more in proactive monitoring on AliExpress now, because more and more brands are on AliExpress, and more consumers are using it around the world. So that's definitely focus. And I think there's more that we can do around consumer awareness. So with some of the larger brands that have more budget, typically the ones that are in our Alibaba Anti-Counterfeiting Alliance, AACA, we have a cooperation program around doing education for consumers. We have various ways of kind of gamifying IP knowledge, because frankly, IP is something a little bit boring to most consumers, and we've got kind of quizzes and games that we've run some offline pop-up exhibitions, and brands have been involved by providing examples of fake products and real products, and the consumers look at it and be like, oh right, okay, and also we provide some information about why buying bad products is bad. So we've been doing that together with those AACA brands, and I think that's something we need to keep doing in the years to come, because a lot of what we traditionally think about in IP is just focused on the supply side. How do we limit the supply for counterfeit products or infringing products? What more can we do on the demand side to gradually reduce the amount of consumers that would be in the market for those products? So I think there's more that we can do around that. And then I think we're still in COVID. It's still a long COVID period. So I think the event that you've organised with the World Trademark Review and Alban, thanks for hosting today, is really important. I think there's more that we can do to talk to brand owners that are based outside China that are confined to their homes, and make sure that we're receiving that information. So coming back to the first question you asked me about, I talked about having a platform for receiving information and then building on that. So I think we used to have every year at least the bigger brands coming all the time to visit us in China, because they'd want to visit their China offices anyway for commercial reasons, and they come and speak to Alibaba about IP while they're here. That's just not happening now. So I think there's more that we can do around reaching out and speaking to people in a lot more detail online.
Great, thank you, Mick. So the first kind of sessions that I want to discuss about with you today is how do we actually achieve this win-win situation. So I think you guys already covered part of it, but I want to focus a little bit more onto this aspect of how do we achieve it together. So the first questions I have is actually in terms of the use of vendors, because I believe Aaron, James, I believe you guys might be using vendors in some way as well. So what is the vendor's position in this kind of win-win relationship between platform and your brand? Or you can also say that what more do you think they can do, or do you see that there's really not a need for another party to be in the middle as well? What's your view on that?
I think we currently use this vendor to simplify our enforcement process. So we have different type of vendor, but how we ultimately want to achieve to try and ease some of the resource is not having to reach out to 10 different platforms and monitor the platform itself. And whereas we have one centralized vendor which can scrape all the offering of according to the keywords of our products. And also for the complaint process, we have vendor that go out and reach to try and set up a complaint portal with different online platform, so that we can just log into one single portals and basically try and review and monitor and also enforce in one space. So in that sense, it's all time saving for the brand owner. But I think it is important for the win-win relationship. It depends on the platform willingness and enthusiasm towards like working with third-party vendor, because this will involve a lot of interaction between our vendor and the platform itself. So.
Interesting. So Aaron, what's your view?
Yes, I think they're crucial part of the whole ecosystem, I would say. And I think why they're most important is because it helps us report things in a very official channel across the platforms. I mean, it's impossible, for a brand owner to manage all of that at one go. So they definitely need a helping hand there so that they can handle across different kind of platforms. One day it will be an Amazon, different day it may be a Facebook marketplace, another day it can be a different platform. All have different ways of dealing with it. So a central repository, as mentioned by James, is absolutely critical, really helps. One of the things which can actually help more is having country-specific managers within that particular, country-specific or region-specific, people within that particular vendor, so that they know and understand the ecosystem of that particular region, because all the regions will have very, very different kind of requirements and very different kind of things which will be there in the platform. So I think that is something which is very essential. And the right amount of training from the brand owner is very, very critical in terms of how they can, they understand exactly what needs to be done. And one of the things which I also believe is for any critical escalations, the brand owner themselves can get in touch with the platforms and discuss about it. But definitely for the regular stuff and for the regular reporting and continuous push with these platforms, these vendors are quintessential. They're very, very important to do it. So it's important they're rightly given the training and all the tools to perform, and also from their end as well, a right amount of commitment and also adherence to clear TATs from the brand owner is being complied with. Because a lot of times the TAT is also something which needs to be very, very critical. The time response within which they need to respond back, report it, and then let the brand owner keep updated, what exactly is happening. And also having some kind of regional capability to handle those platforms which they're handling in a particular region. I would say those are the things which can be really go a long way in helping it.
Yeah, that's very interesting because from our angle, this kind of win-win-win situation is certainly most ideal, but I don't believe there's anyone that actually figured it out. In terms of what James mentioned and Aaron as well, data sharing. How do we actually make everything into the same portal for visibility? I think a lot of the portal platforms will provide information, but they're not really exportable, and they don't really talk to each other. So certainly there are things that we can do. But I don't want to chime in too much, but let me go back to Mick as well. So how do you see the role of vendors in the relationship? Do you see this complicate things from your opinion?
No, they don't complicate things. I think I don't have that much to add. Actually, I think that, as the guy said, vendors are an incredibly valuable part of the ecosystem, and they allow for specialization. There's online vendors that specialize in different marketplaces, different countries, different regions. Offline vendors obviously very important as well. If you're sat in Shanghai, you don't have the network of police, for example, in, let's say, Wuhan. If you wanted to go and talk to the police in Wuhan and try and get them to do a raid on a factory. So just as we would online or offline teams work with brands, third-party vendors to help them facilitate offline raids around China, and it's really important.
Cool. Now, Mike, a follow-up questions for you, because when we talk about building this kind of win-win relationship, what's your key challenge at the moment? could be just resources, could be the privacy issue. Again, just can't share data. What's are the key things that is the main obstacle for you?
Well, around sharing data, obviously we've got restrictions and regulations about what data we can send across borders, and around what privacy data we can send relating to some online stores businesses. And we defer to the laws and what law enforcement or courts tell us to do with that data. But for sure, it is what it is, and we have certain constraints in which we have to operate. In terms of other challenges, I think sometimes particular brands or particular vendors will, have business interests as part of their role alongside their IPR interests. For us as a platform, we're trying to run an IPR protection mechanism, and then we might have a lot of kind of IPR requests going through our IPR system which aren't really related to an infringement, and they might be trying to tackle a parallel imports issue or something which isn't really regulated, but it's important to the brand, but it's not necessarily against the law. Or you've got some outright just pure anti-competition complaints and people inappropriately using the IPP. And I raise these challenges not because a particular brand might seek to do that, but it does happen on our platform. And then what it means is that we have to be very, very careful when we're assessing all of the complaints. We can't, a lot of brands imagine a kind of a final end game where every request is taken down immediately without any scrutiny, without any evidence. But we can't do that because of the difference in the quality of the requests that we get. And I think in terms of the Chinese laws, they've obviously seen that when they made the eCommerce law, and they've actually put into the law a requirement for preliminary evidence from rights holders in the notifications. So that's very much framed the way that notifications are run in China, and it's a challenge in terms of making the enforcement more efficient, for sure.
So am I correct in saying that you from your perspective, it's the regulation or the policy that is the main challenge for you? Because
I think the regulation is seeking to create standards in the industry, but based on the fact that people use IP enforcement channels for IP, but also for business considerations in both good faith and bad faith, and that's a challenge for platforms for sure, and it's also a challenge for brands. It's a challenge that we share.
Interesting, because certainly Alibaba has the good faith program, and I think the good faith program is being put in place partly to address this, because if you complain too much on fake complaints and stuff like that, then you lose your good faith status. So, James and Aaron, I just want to get your opinion from that perspective. Do you see the good faith being effective for you?
Definitely. So I believe that Kevin Klein will go through ICCA on the good faith program, and as Mick mentions, there's certainly difficulties or concern regarding maybe some brand that could be utilizing this for the commercial purposes. So we kind of acknowledge that the fact is this is mainly for infringing, catching out for infringement complaint. So what we do is we also make sure all the listing that we submitted through the good faith program are kind of 100% accurate. Just to stay in the program.
So it seems like there's some interference there. Please mute yourself. So Aaron, can I have your opinion as well?
I think my apologies there. I don't have much visibility on the good faith program. But then if you ask me from a very generic perspective, a couple of things I'd like to highlight is what Mike mentioned is absolutely right. And a lot of times such request also comes to us as a legal team from the business side. And we try and, educate them, telling them that this platform which we're using is specifically for reporting counterfeits or IP infringement issues. If there is something else, we need to find a better way or a different kind of solution to tackle them. Like this may not be the right forum for us to report, because this is something we are utilizing only for the IP infringement or the counterfeit issues. If there is any other within the platform, if there is any other avenue through which we can report it, we'll use that. And from an evidentiary point of view, I would also like to highlight that as a brand, as I said earlier also, 99.9% times we buy the samples. We just need to have that evidence in place before we do anything about it. We just don't want to take chances, because a lot of times what happens is we do report the issues. The platform might come back to us and tell us, where is the sample? Did you buy it? Where is the evidence? So we don't want to get into that stage. We want to cooperate with the platform and give them with all the required information so that they can act on it swiftly and quickly.
Yeah, I guess this is part of the win-win, right? So from a brand owner perspective, it's also our responsibility to make sure that we are submitting real complaints and not just misusing the program as well. So we have 3 minutes left. So let me ask each one of you to spend 1 minute to have a closing remarks and give our audience an advice on this particular topic about win-win. Can I maybe start with Mick?
Final advice: so happy year of the Ox, and we're looking forward to working with the rights holders, vendors, both big and SMEs as well as vendors. So if you have any queries about how our IP strategy is working, or any issues that you've come across that you think we need to do better, we have an open door at Alibaba, and you can get my contact details, and we have a team who will be able to help you. So yeah, we look forward to increasing that cooperation of feedback mechanism. Thank you.
Awesome. James?
So, just as offline enforcement, we cannot just sit and wait for the landlord to provide us with a lead. So I would suggest, once you have worked it out, which platform to focus your time and resource on, start engaging, and you're going to be in it to win it. So, join all the seminar offered by, through maybe organizations such as QVPC, to learn about the platform, its operation, what initiative are there in terms of brand protection, the punishment, structure for IP violation. Just learn everything, and to join all these groups that could be created. Working group that is being created by the platform itself, to share your ideas and basically make constructive feedbacks, and to be a part of the change for the platform. By suggesting maybe certain things like, informing of new trends that we discover as the brand for our own products, such as live streaming, hidden links, or to suggest, is there any way to simplify the complaint process, as Mix is already working hard on for Alibaba, and maybe to even propose for a more adequate punishment protocol if they don't have one already. So, great
advice. So, Aaron,
I would say the best advice is to watch this recording, and you'll know all about it. Jokes apart, I would say that yes, it's been a fantastic learning for me as well. So I would say for a win-win, couple of things which are very important is, as mentioned rightly by James and Mick as well, some of the things which are very critical is both the platform and the brand owner having real side expectations, not having unreal expectations, right? I'll report and this will happen and all that. That is not possible. You have to also understand from the other side what challenges they have in terms of how they can report. As Mick had mentioned about it, sometimes to the kind of complaints they'll receive may not be the right thing. There might not be a solution for that. So those kind of things. So I think the first thing is to have realistic expectations. Second is to also having a continuous dialogue with the platforms. Maybe cadence would be a very good idea. To have a monthly cadence or a bi-weekly cadence is something which really helps a lot of times brands to understand, even after having very good mechanism or tools for that particular platform. I would say a MOU can be a good start if you want to reach that a stage wherein you want to put those covenants in place. So for covenant, I would say that a couple of things you can mention in that is in terms of what are the proactive and reactive measures you'll be doing, what are the tasks you'll be following, in terms of, suppose I report a listing today, in how many hours and how much time can I expect reaction to that as per your policy. I'm not saying that you change your policy. It is as per your policy, whatever it is. A bit of clause on information sharing, that is critical. Like as mentioned, for the online to offline journey, we need that. A lot of times what happens, a challenge also I'd like to mention is, I buy a product from a particular platform. The seller details will be there in that particular invoice or whatever that is. We receive the product. Now we want to investigate further on that particular seller. A lot of times what happens, when we go on ground, we don't find that seller itself. That's not there. We have found instances wherein the tax ID numbers or anything can be our basis of forged documents. So those kind of things, brings a big challenge for the brand owner when they want to go for the offline actions. So I think a bit of cooperation there in terms of sharing of information. There are a lot of challenges as per all legal implications also in terms of how much can be shared. But then what I can tell you is that of the recent trends in India and the neighboring countries, in India particularly, the recent e-commerce policy rules which have come, they clearly say that they're more open-minded toward these kind of solutions, wherein they want the platforms to put up information of sellers in the portal with exact details. And they also, a lot of pushes around that piece because so that authentic information is provided both to the customer and any person who's buying the product from the platform. So those are the things which should be critical in terms of how you can manage that particular thing. And apart from that, I would say I think a collaborative approach rather than a pushing approach from the brands is really really important, because sometimes what happens when you're a brand owner, you think, okay, this is a platform which is selling my product. I'm selling my products have been sold here. So if I pull off my products, they'll be at loss. Maybe that is true. It might happen, but then that does not solve anything. It has to be a collaborative approach wherein you need to join hands together and work together towards it.
Great. Thank you, Aaron. So in closing, I think this is a very interesting and important topic as well. I think, as Aaron mentioned, we cannot have a mentality that we are against each other. That needs to be a cooperative approach. And what I see also is that there are more platforms being built every weeks or every month. So the whole concept about platform cooperation, as James mentioned, you can't talk to 10, you can't talk to 20. There's a finite amount of time that you can do so. So, but without the platform cooperation, you can't really deal with the counterfeit issues in this internet age as well. So I think this is a very good topic. I hope this panel give everyone in the audience something to think of, and hopefully we can continue this conversation and really improve on this cooperation. So thank you very much.